So, Lynn, dann walte deines Amtes als Watcher und tu krasse Dinge. Mit deinen Gefährten als Augenzeugen begibst du dich auf die Stelle, wo vor langer Zeit Theos vor seinen Leuten stand. Die große Maschine liegt untätig und betriebsbereit vor dir. Ja, ich bin sehr froh, dass ich die Leute dabei habe. Es gibt mir schon ein bisschen Selbstsicherheit und Kraft. Das ist nämlich genau das. Nicht nur meine Companions waren von mir abhängig, Lynn hat auch ihre Companions gebraucht. Wir sind eine Familie. Eine sehr seltsame Familie. Mit vielen Verrücktheiten. Aber das sind die besten Familien. Du hast diese Maschine und andere wie sie im Betrieb gesehen. Du verstehst ihre Funktionsweise. Es ist ein Apparat zum Umleiten von Seelen. Für einen Watcher wäre es ein leichtes, die Umleitungsrichtung zu beeinflussen. Doch angesichts der Größe der Maschine könnte es das Letzte sein, das du tust. Oh Gott, das klingt so nach, du stirbst gleich. Noch nicht, genau, weil man hat jetzt voll die Möglichkeiten, nochmal irgendwo hinzugehen. Sprich den Befehl zur Aktivierung der Maschine aus. Als sich alte Zahnräder lockern und zu drehen beginnen, hörst du ein kreischendes Mahlgeräusch von Stein auf Stein. Die bleiben nur Sekunden, bevor die Seelen in die Ader geschickt werden. Dies ist deine einzige Chance, sie umzuleiten. Die Seelen zurück in den Reinkarnationskreislauf schicken, die Seelen zurück in die vorgesehenen Körper leiten, die Seelen entropisch auflösen und ihre Existenz beenden, die Essenz auf im Dyrwood existierende Seelen verteilen, um sie zu stärken, den Seelen gestatten, durch die Ader zurück zur Vodika zu gelangen, die Seelen zu einem unbekannten Ort zerstreuen. Also im Endeffekt Bareth, Helia, Remagan, Galloway, Vodika, Wade. Wenn man es nochmal so übersetzen möchte quasi. Das wusste ich aber auch nicht mehr, dass man da gesagt hat, du hast jetzt so ein paar Sekunden Zeit, um dich zu entscheiden. Du solltest dir jetzt sicher sein. Die Seelen zurück in die vorgesehenen Körper leiten. Du schließt deine Augen und erweiterst deine Wahrnehmung nach außen. Du nimmst die immense Gesamtheit zehntausender Seelen auf, die um die Kammer kreisen. Du hast die Seelen kaum im Griff. Bevor es dir bewusst wird, musst du kämpfen, um sie alle unter deinem Einfluss zu behalten. Und als die Maschine an Geschwindigkeit zunimmt, kannst du spüren, wie sie deinem Griff entgleiten. Einen kurzen Moment lang fühlt es sich so an, als hättest du sie alle gleichzeitig im Griff. Und ihre Kraft ist derart stark, dass sie dich zu zerreißen droht. In diesem Moment widmest du dein ganzes Wesen der Änderung ihres Umlaufs und lenkst ihren Fluss in eine neue Richtung.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Dyrwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Theos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time, parents of hollow-born children woke to the cries of their infants and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of Hollowborn had died during Wideone's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last Hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Dyrwood standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But once the dozens had regrouped in the wake of the riots, they quickly put an end to the criminal activity. They patrolled the streets in droves and administered their brand of law on any perceived offenders. This was not the erratic justice of the mob, however. The dozens had taken to heart the strengths of their adversaries, the Knights of the Crucible, and emerged as a far more organized, disciplined force. With the waning strength of the other Defiance Bay powers, the leadership of the dozens took the opportunity to establish its own group as the dominant peacekeeping force in the city. The dozens would soon find themselves overwhelmed by the problems of a leaderless metropolis. But they found an uneasy new partner in the surviving forces of the Crucible Knights, who understood the city's infrastructure and were able to keep the worst of its problems under control. The destruction of the machine atop Ter Noaneth spelled the end of the reanimated corpses in Heritage Hill. Though at first few were willing to venture into the abandoned district, it was soon cleaned out and rebuilt. The district's horrors still fresh in people's minds, it would be some time before it was fully repopulated. But eventually the lure of cheap prime land would all but erase the memory. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few animancers survived the first day. In the weeks that followed, angry citizens, their rage stoked by word that the Duke had been about to ban the practice, formed vigilante mobs and hunted down the survivors. The sanitarium was decorated with the dismembered heads and torsos of those who had practiced the science, and anyone caught studying it thereafter was soon added to the macabre display. The age of animancy in Dyrwood had come to an abrupt halt. Abidon's renewal brought new vigor and purpose to a god long known for quiet, steady labor. Handicraft saw a revival in the Dyrwood, and no smith wanted for an apprentice. Additionally, Abidon's restored interest in preservation led to redoubled efforts to survey Engwithan ruins. Animancers and craftsmen alike found much to study, but tensions with Air Glanfath rose. As for Stalwart, the Battle of Caron's Scar only strengthened their resolve to unlock the mysteries of Durgan steel and build new marvels with the White Forge. However, Stalwart's ambitions brought them into further conflict with the Red Serens, as more and more impoverished communities gathered at the border and vowed to finish the work of the Iron Flail. It would be many generations before the region saw peace. The Flames That Whisper clan found a cautious peace with Stalwart, particularly once the villagers heard of the aid the ogres had offered against the Eyeless. The clan moved back into the Russet Wood, and as Stalwart grew in prestige, the villagers formed a tighter alliance with their ogre neighbors. Within a generation, ogre traders visited Stalwart, and village hunters were welcome in the russet wood. Harmka's death had brought the devil of Carrick little satisfaction. In time, her taste for vengeance soured. What replaced it was a hunger to feel something, anything, new. Summer had thinned the snowpack twice over when she felt the joint at her elbow first begin to stiffen. She turned her back on the hopes of animancy and civilization and walked east. She pushed through the mountains, past Raid Ceres, and into the broad plains of Ishamiddle. She had forgotten what it was like to simply journey, no goal or destination in mind. Though she felt nothing more than the steady thump of her feet on the road, the endless horizons and grassy meadows were new to her. She measured her time in the gradual rusting of her body and was satisfied. Her movements slowed, but so did the world around her. Waist-high grasses undulated intact in the wind, as gradual as the tides. Sparrows and blackjays made steady pilgrimages across the sky, each flap of their wings a solemn salute. She could hardly move when she found something she had never seen before, the ocean. With the last of her strength, she pulled herself beneath the water, content at last to feel the movement of currents and the constant caress of the waves. Zawa came to believe that the Deccan had survived through him. He returned to Ishamiddle, where he united a number of small, vulnerable tribes under the beliefs of his people. He called them Takanakin, kin of Takan, and under his tutelage, they became strong enough to resist would-be conquerors. Zawa taught his secrets not to one chosen person, but to all, that the line of knowledge might never be broken. Free from the burden of her memory, Maneha soon left the gift-bearers and resumed adventuring. Now that she had a taste for the world, she wanted to experience it anew. Maneha rediscovered her zest for battle, extravagance, and romance. She kept her gaze on the horizon, looking from one journey to another more distant, from the lover in her arms to another more fervent. Hers was a life of excitement, violence, and passion. She moved too quickly for regret to catch up with her, and she hoped only that she might outpace it in the next life as well. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Dyrwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Dyrwoodinians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Dyrwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. After the death of the master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Adnua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Adnua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Palagina had gone against the Duke Spell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfath to accommodate the recovering Dyrwooden market. With the Dyrwood's people still weakened by Weidman's legacy, the Valian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Palagina was banished from the republics. She traveled north in the Eastern Reach, avoiding Valian ports and entering the ranks of the kind wayfarers. Despite her bravery and dedication to those in her care, her strange appearance made her feel like an outsider wherever she went. Haravius took his leave of the party and, after his first bath in years, returned to his nomadic lifestyle. With his homesickness expunged, he found renewed joy and tranquility in his wandering survey of the wilderness. For the first time in his life, he ventured beyond sight of the mountains of Glonfath. During his travels, he penned numerous journals and sketches detailing his travels through frozen tundra, searing desert, and tropical forests. Wherever he went, Haravius left behind stories of the Autumn Druid, a temperamental, one-eyed wise man of the forest, known to bring food to lost travelers and unusual advice to anyone willing to ask him a question. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Dyrwood, which, like many towns in the Dyrwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Dyrwood soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Dyrwood would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Theos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Theos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. With the Watcher's goals accomplished and his own vows fulfilled, Kanorua sailed back toward Rawatai, thinking on the lessons his travels had provided him. By the time he landed at Tekoa, he understood what his path must be. Standing before the Lore College, Kanorua explained that the tablet he sought had been destroyed, and so a true interpretation of the Tonvi Oratoa could no longer exist. The people of Rawatai would have to create their own. He described the many strange things he had seen in his travels, and announced his intent to pursue the accumulation of knowledge abroad, seeking answers to new questions. True to his word, Kana soon set sail on yet another expedition, and in Tekoa, his passionate accounts inspired many to follow in his footsteps. With Theos defeated and the souls released from sun and shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Dyrwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Dyrwood, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Dyrwood, and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance used Magrin's strength only until Theos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. After 5 years of searching for Persak, Sagani's 4-month journey home felt longer still. The Dyrwood, Air Glonfoth, the Valian republics became places on a map, endless expanses of green between her and Nasitok. Her homecoming was celebrated by all of Masuk, yet it was the reunion with Kalu and their children that truly brought her joy. She relinquished her role in the long hunts, and ever after, she and Itumak spent their days working in the village and their nights at her hearth. She watched her own children and their children grow and thrive. When she finally passed, she lay surrounded by the affection and tears of 5 generations. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead, made no easier by your decision to bring an infant to sun and shadow.